especially of Karen's remarkable voice. She had a timeless voice.
What if I told you that Karen Carpenter's final recording session contained a secret that her family kept hidden for 40 years? What if I told you that new technology has finally cleaned up that damaged tape, revealing words that nobody expected to hear? Today, we're going to uncover the heartbreaking truth about Karen Carpenter's last moments in the studio and the devastating confession that changed everything we thought we knew about her final days. Karen Carpenter had one of the most beautiful voices in music history. Her soft, warm tone could make anyone feel like she was singing directly to them. But behind that angelic voice was a woman fighting battles that most people never knew about. And on April 25th, 1982, she walked into a recording studio for what would be her final session. What happened in those few minutes would remain a mystery for decades. But first, let me take you back to the beginning of Karen's incredible story. Karen Carpenter was born on March 2nd, 1950, in New Haven, Connecticut. Her father, Harold, wasn't just any regular working guy. He had actually been born in China and went to fancy boarding schools in England before coming to America to work as a printer. That kind of international background was pretty unusual for a working-class family back then. When Karen was born, America was going through the baby boom. Girls were supposed to be quiet, delicate, and obedient. But Karen was different right from the start. She was strong, rough around the edges, and loved playing with the boys. She didn't care about makeup or pretty dresses. She just wanted to have fun and be herself. Everything changed when Karen was 13 years old. In June 1963, the whole family packed up and moved from cold Connecticut to sunny California. A lot of people think they moved when Karen was 4, but that's not true. The real move happened in 1963, and it was all because of music. Karen's older brother, Richard, was incredibly talented at piano, and her dad, Harold, thought California would give him the best shot at making it big. They chose Downey, a quiet suburban town between two major highways. Moving across the country was expensive and risky for a family without much money, but Harold managed to get another job at a printing plant, and the family started their new life. Without that move, Karen's amazing voice might have stayed hidden forever. Back in Connecticut, Karen used to bang on pots and pans just for fun. But when she got to Downey High School in 1964, music became serious. She didn't want to take gym class, so she joined the school band instead. They gave her a glockenspiel, and she absolutely hated it. But then something magical happened. She saw her friend Frankie Chavez playing drums, and she couldn't look away. The way he moved, the rhythm he created, it lit something inside her that she'd never felt before. Karen begged her parents for a drum set. She wanted to be like her drumming heroes. Her parents spent $300 on a Ludwig drum kit, which would be like spending $3,000 today. The moment that drum set arrived at their house, Karen sat behind it and played like she had been born to do it. Within just 1 year, she could play complex rhythms that most drummers never even try to learn. But while Karen was becoming amazing on drums, she was also dealing with something much harder at home. Her mother, Agnes, wanted her to be feminine and delicate. But Karen was still that same girl who loved playing sports with the boys. She was strong and tough, and she didn't want to change. This created constant fighting at home, and it made Karen feel like she wasn't good enough just being herself. In 1965, when Karen was 15, she formed a group called the Dick Carpenter Trio with Richard and their friend Wes Jacobs. They didn't just play at school events. They performed real jazz music at actual clubs. They even played at Disneyland. Richard would watch Karen behind those drums and say she looked like she had been born in a drum factory. They were so good that they got a recording deal with RCA and recorded 2 tracks. Karen wasn't singing yet, but the fact that a 15-year-old girl was playing serious jazz music and being taken seriously by adults was almost unheard of. But underneath all the success, something dark was starting to grow. Karen began dieting when she was just 14 years old. She weighed 145 pounds and was 5 feet 4 inches tall, which was completely normal. But she didn't like her body. With a doctor's help, she started a strict diet with only lean foods and 8 glasses of water every day. Her mother supported this diet, which made everything worse. By 1973, Karen had lost weight down to 120 pounds, but she was already deep into a dangerous mindset of controlling and restricting her food. In April 1966, everything changed again. Karen was 16 when they had an audition with Joe Osborne, a famous bass player. She was only supposed to play drums, but she decided to sing too. The moment her voice came out, everyone in the room stopped what they were doing and just listened. Osborne signed them immediately. He wasn't even focused on Richard anymore. All he could hear was Karen's incredible voice. That same year, they went on a TV talent show and performed while Karen sang and drummed at the same time. They won the competition. That was the exact moment when Karen's voice became the center of their sound. Nobody had planned it. It just happened naturally. But it changed everything about their future. Karen graduated from high school in 1967 when she was just 17 years old. She won an award for music excellence and went to Long Beach State College to study music. There, she took voice lessons and learned how to expand her vocal range to a full 3 octaves. Her teacher said she had a natural gift for pop music, but Karen made a surprising choice. She left college because she didn't want to wait. She wanted to pursue music full-time with Richard right away. This was the late 1960s, and most girls weren't encouraged to chase uncertain dreams like music. But Karen didn't care what other people thought. She could feel something special in her bones, and she was going to follow it no matter what. In April 1969, after being rejected by 10 different record labels, something finally clicked. Herb Alpert from A&M Records heard their demo tape. Karen was just 19 years old, but her voice stopped him completely. He said it touched his heart, and he signed them on April 22, 1969. This was the turning point they had been waiting for. Their first album came out in October 1969, and it was a complete failure. Only 18,000 copies sold. Critics didn't understand their music, and audiences didn't connect with it. Karen played drums and even bass guitar on some tracks, but nothing seemed to work. It was a major disappointment, but something about their sound was waiting to break through. During those early recording sessions, Karen did something that shocked everyone in the studio. She refused to stop drumming while she sang. Most people said it couldn't be done well, but Karen proved them wrong. She sang from behind her drum kit with perfect timing and control. She always said she was a drummer who happened to sing, not a singer who happened to play drums. By 1970, they were touring constantly, playing around 200 shows in small clubs. Karen faced mean comments and sexist remarks almost every night. People didn't like seeing a woman behind a drum kit, and they weren't afraid to let her know. They called her names and tried to make her feel bad, but she kept playing and kept singing. Those rough club experiences taught her how to perform no matter what people said or did. In early 1970, A&M Records almost dropped them. Their first album was failing, and the label was losing faith. But Karen wasn't ready to give up. She focused everything on one song called We've Only Just Begun, and she wouldn't stop working on it until it was absolutely perfect. Take after take, she poured her heart and soul into that recording. When the Carpenters released We've Only Just Begun on May 14, 1970, it didn't just become a hit. It changed their entire lives. The song stayed at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 4 weeks straight and remained on the chart for 17 weeks. It became the second biggest song of the entire year. That one single broke sales records and helped define their whole sound. Karen's voice was so perfect that it earned them their first Grammy Award in 1971. Everything changed from that moment on. Exactly 1 year later, they released their self-titled album, and it was even more successful. It climbed to number 2 on the charts and sold over 4 million copies in the United States alone. One song on that album, called Superstar, showed just how much Karen could feel the music. She had only heard the song on the radio once, but she recorded her emotional version in just one take. Richard couldn't believe how powerful it was. But what people didn't see was how much Karen was already suffering behind the scenes. In 1972, President Richard Nixon invited them to the White House. He introduced them to world leaders as examples of young America at its very best. It looked like a perfect dream come true. But right before she walked out to perform, Karen had been so nervous that she threw up. She had done this many times before big shows, but she always hid it from everyone. While the president was holding them up as symbols of success and happiness, Karen was quietly falling apart inside. That same year, they released Goodbye to Love, and it shocked people for a completely different reason. In the middle of this sweet, gentle ballad was a loud, distorted electric guitar solo that nobody expected. Fans weren't ready for this change. Some radio stations refused to play the song, and they got hate mail from people who thought they were turning into a rock band. The song still reached number 2 on the charts, but it was the first time some fans had turned against them. In 1973, they released an album that let Karen show off her drumming skills again. She had done almost all the percussion herself, and the result was unforgettable. People finally realized that Karen wasn't just singing like a star, she was also creating the rhythm that held everything together. But by 1974, things were starting to change in a scary way. Fans began writing letters asking if Karen was sick. She would smile and say she was just tired, but the truth was much more painful. The pressure to look perfect, sound perfect, and be perfect was beginning to hurt her in ways that nobody could see yet. In 1975, during a performance in Las Vegas, Karen collapsed on stage. Her weight had dropped to just 90 pounds. It was the first time her illness became visible to the public. The Carpenters had to cancel their tours in Japan and Europe, losing huge amounts of money and momentum. It was the beginning of a long, painful decline that would continue for years. By the end of 1975, Karen was forced to give up drumming for good. People complained that they couldn't see her behind the drum kit, so the team pushed her to stand at the microphone instead. She didn't want to do this. Drumming made her feel safe and confident. She had always said she was a drummer who happened to sing. Now she had to stand alone in front of everyone, feeling exposed and vulnerable. In 1976, their album didn't do well at all. It didn't even break the top 30 in the United States. Richard was struggling with his own problems with sleeping pills, and Karen kept getting thinner and thinner. This was the first album where she didn't play drums at all, and her voice sounded softer now, almost like a whisper. Fans didn't understand why everything was changing. In 1977, while filming their first TV special, Karen worked for 18 hours straight on set. She was determined to look as thin as possible. She had fired her personal trainer for making her gain muscle, and she stopped eating meals. She would offer her food to other people so nobody would notice that she wasn't eating. Her weight dropped to 110 pounds, and still she wasn't satisfied. TV viewers had no idea what was happening behind her smile. By 1978, the cracks in Karen's health had gotten much wider. During the recording of their Christmas album, she got into a serious fight with Richard about re-recording one of their songs. She ended up doing it completely alone, and her voice sounded delicate and haunting. She was wasting away, but at concerts, she still sang like an angel. Fans would gasp when they saw how thin she had become. She weighed just 91 pounds, but she kept performing and pretending everything was fine. That same year, tabloid magazines exploded with stories about her illness. Karen denied everything. When she appeared on TV in 1981 and was asked about anorexia, she smiled and said she was just tired from working too much. But the truth was much more frightening. At night, she was taking up to 90 laxatives to try to make her body even smaller. She was also secretly using thyroid medication under a fake name, trying to speed up her metabolism and lose more weight. In 1979, she was hospitalized for exhaustion, but even from her hospital bed, she insisted on recording vocals. She couldn't stop working. She didn't know how to rest or take care of herself. The entire decade had drained her physically and emotionally, but she still wanted to keep singing. In 1980, Karen got married to a man named Thomas Burris in Beverly Hills. On the outside, it looked like a fairy tale wedding, but it quickly turned into a complete nightmare. Burris had gotten a vasectomy and refused to reverse it, which destroyed Karen's dream of becoming a mother. He also kept borrowing huge amounts of money from her, sometimes up to $50,000 at a time. Friends said this marriage was the breaking point for Karen's mental health. They separated in 1981, and she filed for divorce in 1982. By that time, Karen's weight had fallen to just 80 pounds. One day, Richard found her collapsed in her closet, and next to her were hidden plates of food that she had never eaten. During performances, crowds would gasp out loud when they saw her. People wrote thousands of letters asking what was wrong. Shows had to be canceled because her body was failing, and everyone could finally see it happening. In 1981, Karen finally asked for help. She went to New York to work with a specialist who understood eating disorders. In therapy, she admitted everything she had been doing to her body. She confessed that she was taking up to 90 laxatives every night. Even worse, she revealed that she had been using ipecac syrup to force herself to vomit after eating. This syrup was slowly poisoning her heart, making her feel dizzy and causing her heart to skip beats. She reached her lowest weight ever at just 77 pounds before being hospitalized again, but the damage to her body was already too deep to fix. In January 1982, Karen Carpenter stepped into A&M Studios for what nobody knew would be among her final recording sessions. Everyone went quiet when they saw her. She weighed only 90 pounds on her 5 feet 4 inches frame, just skin and bones. But she still looked focused and ready to sing. When she opened her mouth, that incredible voice was still there. That soft, golden 3-octave range hadn't changed at all, even though her body was wasting away. She recorded 10 songs that month, giving everything she had with the same perfectionism she had always shown. Even though people in the studio were scared she might collapse right there while recording, she kept going. Richard later said he could feel her voice getting weaker physically, but emotionally it still carried all the same weight and beauty it always had. Then came April 25th, 1982. Karen walked into the studio one last time, but she didn't know this would be her final recording session ever. She sang a song called Now in a single take, the kind of perfect performance that most singers could never dream of achieving. She nailed it while barely able to stand up. After the take was finished, she turned to her brother Richard and whispered something that made him freeze. For 40 years, that audio sat in vaults, too damaged and unclear for anyone to understand what she had said. But now, new technology has finally cleaned up that old tape, and what Karen whispered wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't about the music or the recording. It was a confession about her final months that her family had kept secret all these years. What she whispered was devastating. "I don't think I can do this much longer." Those words revealed the real reason she collapsed that February morning less than a year later. She knew she was dying, and everyone around her knew it too, but nobody wanted to face the truth. That recording session included just 2 songs, but in those recordings, Richard said he could hear everything about Karen, her incredible strength, her deep sadness, and the small flame of hope she was still trying to keep alive. 1982 wasn't just about those final recordings. It was also the year Karen was hit hardest behind the scenes in her career. A few years earlier, she had secretly started working on a solo album with a famous producer. It cost $500,000, with $400,000 of that coming from her and Richard's own money. Karen wanted to try something completely new, to step out from behind the drums and explore music that was entirely her own. But when the album was finished, the record label said no. They refused to release it. Not even famous music producer Quincy Jones could convince them to change their minds. Karen was completely crushed. People at the label said she didn't sound strong enough anymore, and that her illness made her unmarketable. They even charged her and Richard $400,000 to cover the cost of the album, taking it directly from their future earnings. That rejection hit Karen like a brick wall. She felt like everything she had poured her soul into had been thrown in the trash. The album wouldn't be released until 1996, 13 years too late for Karen to ever hear people's reactions to her work. By early 1983, there were signs that things might finally be turning around. On January 1st, Karen burst into Herb Alpert's office with a big smile, saying, "Look at me." She seemed hopeful and excited. She had been getting treatment in New York and had even gained 30 pounds, getting back over 100 pounds by Thanksgiving 1982. She went shopping for new clothes and made plans with Richard to go back on tour. On February 1st, they talked about performing again, and she sounded genuinely excited about the future. But behind the scenes, her body was still falling apart from years of abuse. The damage was too severe to heal completely, even though she was trying so hard to get better. On January 11th, she went to a Grammy event where she looked fragile but still joked around with other singers. She even said, "Look at me, I've got an ass," which sounded like she was finally healing and learning to accept her body. She wanted to live and seemed to be fighting for her future. Then came February 4th, 1983. Karen was supposed to sign her final divorce papers that morning, officially ending her terrible marriage. Instead, she collapsed inside a walk-in closet at her parents' home in Downey, California. When the paramedics arrived, her heart was only beating once every 10 seconds, just 6 beats per minute. At 9:51 in the morning, she was declared dead. She was only 32 years old. Just 3 days earlier, she had still been making plans for the future. Nobody expected it to end like this. The autopsy revealed the real nightmare of what Karen had done to her body. She weighed 108 pounds, and her stomach was completely empty except for what looked like green sludge, like dried leaves. Her blood sugar was more than 10 times higher than the normal range. 2 years later, the full truth finally came out. Karen had been using ipecac syrup for years to make herself vomit. She had also been taking 80 to 90 laxatives every night and around 10 thyroid pills every day. All of these were desperate attempts to keep losing weight and stay thin, but they had destroyed her heart completely. The official cause of death was heart failure from something called emmetine cardiotoxicity. Basically, poisoning from the ipecac syrup made much worse by years of anorexia and starvation. Even during those final weeks, there were signs that something was terribly wrong. On January 14th, during dinner with Richard and a friend, she suddenly looked pale and had to leave the table. When she came back, she said she was fine, but people later remember her acting strangely, as if she was trying really hard to pretend everything was okay. She was having hallucinations and told friends she was scared that she might never be able to perform again. When she collapsed that February morning, she was wearing a red jogging suit. Inside the pocket, they found a bottle of anxiety medication. On the outside, she had been smiling, laughing, and making plans. But inside, her body was finally giving up. The damage was just too much for her to overcome. After Karen died, Richard did everything he could to finish what she had started. On October 18th, 1983, he released an album called Voice of the Heart that included Now and the other song from her final recording session. He also added other tracks she had recorded between 1976 and 1983, pieces of music that had never been released before. The album hit number 3 on the charts, and the whole world listened knowing they were hearing Karen's voice for the last time. That voice, once soft and warm and full of life, was now just a memory, but it was still powerful enough to make people cry, especially knowing what had happened to her. It sounded like she was asking for another chance at life. On January 1st, 1989, CBS aired a TV movie called The Karen Carpenter Story, and 30 million people watched it. The film didn't hold back from showing the truth. It depicted her illness, her fading body, the pills, and all the pressure she faced. It shocked viewers because many people had never even heard of anorexia before. The movie earned an Emmy nomination, and CBS ended the broadcast with Richard talking directly to viewers, urging them to learn more about eating disorders. Suddenly, the world was paying attention to something it had ignored for too many years. But Karen's story didn't end there. In 1994, something unexpected happened. A tribute album came out with 14 alternative and rock bands doing covers of Carpenter's songs. These weren't soft rock versions. They were wild, punk-influenced interpretations that gave the music a completely different energy. Critics called it weird, sad, and brilliant all at the same time. Even bands from the grunge music scene felt connected to Karen's music and her story. That soft, aching voice from the 1970s had somehow reached into the hearts of people who hadn't even grown up with her music. Her pain, her beauty, and her incredible sound still mattered to new generations of listeners. Karen Carpenter's story is both beautiful and heartbreaking. She had one of the most perfect voices in music history, but she was fighting battles that most people never knew about. Her final recording session, with those devastating whispered words, "I don't think I can do this much longer," shows us just how much she was suffering behind her perfect smile. Today, Karen's music continues to touch millions of people around the world. Her voice reminds us that even the most talented and successful people can be struggling with invisible pain. Her story has helped raise awareness about eating disorders and has probably saved lives by encouraging people to seek help. If you or someone you know is struggling with an eating disorder, please remember that help is available. Karen's tragic story doesn't have to be repeated. There are resources, treatments, and people who understand what you're going through. Karen Carpenter gave us the gift of her incredible voice, but she also gave us an important lesson about taking care of ourselves and each other. We should remember her not just for her amazing talent, but for the courage it took to keep singing even when she was in so much pain. If this story touched your heart like it touched mine, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear Karen's story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories about the music and artists that changed our world. Karen's voice may be gone, but her legacy lives on through every person who learns from her story and chooses to seek help when they need it most. Thank you for watching, and remember, you are never alone.